Is it going?
We're live.
Yeah.
Yay.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. We matched today.
We didn't plan
I
this.
can
I
take
swear.
mine off.
How about? Okay, we're good. We planned this. Okay. All right. So it's been a while,
Yeah.
and we're back with boundaries and integrity, right? Doesn't it
Yes.
feel like it's low?
It does.
Should we put it up a little bit?
I don't know.
Okay.
Like this?
Yeah.
I think it's partially the ceiling.
I just feel like a giant looking down, don't you?
I'm okay.
All right, we're good. Okay, so today we thought it would be great to catch up because we had promised boundaries a few weeks ago, but we're going to do it today. So boundaries with, what do you want to talk about? How do you want to break this up?
Yeah, we kind of wanted to start talking about boundaries as it relates to responsibilities as a clinician and how to put boundaries in place and how that kind of ties into integrity as well as some like group integrity. So as a clinician, when boundaries are not set up on the forefront, there can be many things that maybe don't get done, or different areas on which you're pulled from one meeting to another meeting. We find in the clinic setting, even though we're in the same building and you can kind of see all of your clients within the same setting, we're still kind of running into where to kind of set up those boundaries and have those in place so that we make sure that our work gets done. We make sure that we're converting at the end of the day. We make sure that we're productive. We make sure our clients are getting all the treatment and supervision that they need and require, and how to fit all that in one day. And with a lot of people in one setting, you do get interrupted quite a bit. So what does that look like?
That's a good point. And I think what we were talking about earlier, what has really, as we were kind of looking at what do we want to go over, what do we want to do, is it really is a very proactive versus reactive approach. And as the years have gone by and as we've gotten better at setting boundaries or adjusting our boundaries, that's what I think has been so important, is it's more proactive, which then creates a lot more, it's a lot more understanding, a lot more, that's what brings integrity into it. So I think that was really good for me to see as we kind of went through all of this. So, but being in a building, for sure, totally different. I also think the why is explaining the why of why we have these boundaries. So people are more, they can adjust to their needs and to their staff's or the parents' needs or what have you. Also, because if you don't understand why you're doing a boundary, example, gift giving is something that we have to set strict boundaries in an ABA. And I think that's really difficult because parents are like, and staff are like, I don't understand. Why can't I give a gift? Why can't they give us a gift? I mean, they're so thankful and they're so, and the why and what that creates and the background of that, I think can be really helpful too. So again, though, there's a lot of information out there, and a lot to give so people understand that. But anyway, what do you want to start with then? Do you want to start with the clinician kind of boundaries?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Cool.
I think that to avoid burnout, it's really important to set up those boundaries, like Farrah was saying, to set up those like proactive pieces. So rather than going into an environment or a situation and saying, okay, I'm going to have boundaries. Like, well, what do those boundaries look like for you? And how do you set those up on the forefront? So does that mean that you proactively set up your schedule? But let's say your schedule is set up and then you get interrupted and you allow that interruption to occur, then your schedule gets redone and things don't happen on time. And it's kind of this like trickle down effect of when we don't set those up proactively, then everything else kind of like falls apart. So thinking about what those boundaries are to you, and testing them to see if they're effective or not effective.
And it helps so you not feel like you're always putting out fires. either.
Yeah.
Because you actually start and complete something, or at least as much as you can. So if you set up, like, to piggyback what you're saying, if you're, let's say you have 10 clients that you work with as a clinician, and you have 5 techs that you work with, to set up those boundaries of, I'm going to, overlap or supervise one technician for 2 hours, you get so much more done in those 2 hours from a beginning to an end standpoint than you would if you're trying to help everybody. Because I think that's the big misconception, is you're like, I'm helping like 6 people though all at once, but they never feel like they really had you, because you're putting out fires, you're running here, you're helping here and doing this, when really if you gave your attention to one client or in one staff, for example, from beginning to end, they're going to get so much more out of that. And you're going to complete something versus feeling like it's not ever, you never got anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So I think that to give yourself permission to do that is actually more helpful, and people feel more valued because you gave them your attention and you did set a beginning and an end, and they know what to expect. So I think that that's really important. I think I was thinking about what phrase is really good. And I always say, know what your baseline is and do just under the baseline, because it's kind of like under promising and over delivering would be better than not even meeting what you said you were going to do. So I would always go a tiny bit less, and then normally you can give more than that, and then they even feel more valued. Your client does, you do. It feels good to complete something too, right? So you just got to give yourself permission and realize it's just so much more. You get so much more out of that with setting those beginning and end kind of type set for each person, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the clinic.
Yeah. And I mean, I think going back to giving yourself permission, that's sometimes very challenging. I mean, we're all in this field to help people. But yes, helping everyone at once, you're not dedicated to one thing, and the productivity of your work starts to go down if you're all over the place and helping everyone. And so giving yourself permission to say no, is challenging.
But once you do, it's like you grow wings, because then you're like, when I think back to, like, let's say I want to meet with you, right? Yeah. And I'm trying to meet with you, just as an example, and you're constantly being pulled this way, and I can't get to you. You know how frustrating that can be for a person, that you have something important or you need somebody, and then you feel undervalued or not appreciated, is what, you know what I mean? The person that's trying to. So if you always look at the other person's perspective of, like, how you have felt in situations like that, when you can't get somebody that you need to complete, that's how everybody's feeling. Then you have 10 people that are feeling that way, versus wait a week and I'll be with you for an hour or 2, whatever you set up, or 3 hours or whatever it may be. Then you set the next time, and then, I mean, that's really where we've been successful. Yeah. Is not talking every day, constantly all day long about every little thing. Is that we set times, we're committed to it, we're on time, we're there, we're present. So that kind of goes into the next thing too. But I think that that's a good way of looking at it, is other people's perspective and how you felt in those situations, right? So I think that's a good way to do it.
I think we've all been there and been on that, like, receiving end of it too, where you needed that person and they weren't there. You had a scheduled meeting time with somebody and they were late and you didn't get to talk about everything, or it got canceled. I mean, I've been guilty of that too, like canceling a meeting or running late, and then those things just keep getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. So, and then it makes your internal struggle is worse, because then oh, now I have 10 things to do versus like this one thing to do. It keeps kind of piling on.
So to always come back to that, I think, is important, of like, how does that make me feel, and how like I'm, I can't get ahead. I can't get this, I think that that's really important. And I always think of Carmen and what she always says. It's just it so sticks out, is I always thought I was helping everybody, because I was showing them that I really cared and I could do a little bit of everything. but everybody was frustrated because I could never complete anything, right? So I think that sticks with me, that like, that's so true. It feels much better to get 1 or 2 things done, meet with that person, come to a, conclusion or whatever, and move on to the next thing. So it really is so beneficial if you set that, beginning and end and times and being accountable. Yeah. Cool. I think that's good. So, anything else to add, do you think?
No, I mean, I think we could kind of go down to some things that like have worked for us. We kind of touched on it a little bit, is setting due dates, I think has been something that has been really effective for us. In addition to having those like action items and agendas, and because for a while we would have meetings that really had no clear end in sight. So it could go on and on and on unless we had this agenda that said, okay, we're gonna have our intentions be focused in on this, and when this is done, the meeting ends. We even assigned someone to be the person that says we're off track, get back on track. Or what needs to be a breakout meeting, and putting that on the breakout meeting so that we didn't talk about it in the other meeting. Putting those action items down with the dates. I think the dates were really important.
Like due dates?
Yeah, the due dates of like when these plans were going to be done, so that we could hold one another accountable for that too.
I agree. I think on top of that is make sure you're describing what your intention is and giving what your intention is. When you're like last week, when I was like, we have this note, everybody has to come back to this note. Otherwise the note doesn't serve any purpose, with beginning, because there's, times when you could see nobody had logged in and looked at it. So how do you know what your checklist is? How do you know what the due date is? So it was up to me to say, well, the intention of this note was this, and this is my expectation of this note. And then, you've done a really nice job of like, okay, so what is our due date? When is this due? When is this supposed to be complete? We can always reach out and say, listen, I'm really struggling with this area. Can A, somebody help me with it? Or B, can I have an extra day? But it's that communication piece too, which, when we were looking up, like, what does integrity mean? And so what did I put down? What's the definition? I'm just trying to see here. So integrity is about being whole and complete in your word. So that's a piece of that. So if you're saying you're going to do it, then you should do it. You should follow through. If you're having, trouble, or you see, that you're not going to make that due date, it's really up to you to be accountable to say, I'm struggling. Help me. Or can you help me? Or I could say, I can do that for you. I have an extra hour or whatever it may take. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, both holding true to integrity and knowing how to restore integrity. So if I know that I'm going to miss a due date, getting in communication with that as soon as possible to make a request. And that request could be denied. I mean, you could say like, no, we really need this done. And that just is dependent on what the project is, I guess. But yeah, I mean, getting in touch with that communication end is huge, because we've all been in situations where we've given a due date on something, and once you start doing that, you're like, oh, there's no way that I'm going to be able to get this done in that amount of time. So yeah, you either ask for help, you ask for an extension, but you're bringing that to the team. And think about all the anxiety that you have if you like held on to it and just like didn't get in communication, and you're just holding on to this thing that you're not going to finish on time. You know that when you show up to the meeting the next week, you're not going to have it done, and everyone's going to expect you to have it done. And so holding on to that is far worse than just getting that communication.
Well, then you have avoidance behavior happening where people will call in, or they'll say they can't make the meeting. I mean, I'm not saying that's what happens every time, but it's more apt to, because you're embarrassed, or you didn't, if you're not communicating about that. I think it also sets up for the next time that when you do say, yes, I can do that, and I think back to like the BHCOE
Yeah.
accreditation when I had a couple of little projects to do, and the person that's running it is like, I really can't at this moment. I'm really focused on these two things. And I'm like, that was a good boundary, because now you know that you can finish that potentially, and that's the idea. And so how do you do that? So I think that that's really important too, because you're going to be set up for success. And I think you get better at it too, for the most part. It gets easier to say no, I guess, when you know how important something else is, and you really want to hold true to what you know, to your word, that this is what I said I would do, and I want to get it done. Right?
Yeah.
That it feels good when you're like, I mean, look how excited I got for the last couple of weeks. I'm like, we made a deadline. This is awesome. And we're going to make next week's deadline, which is today, actually.
Yeah.
I should ask
Which,
if we got it.
Well, we don't, but
It's got to be close.
it's close. Yeah. In my defense, I asked for till Tuesday. See, I got in communication.
So you still have till tomorrow.
I do. Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's you're just more apt to be more successful. And again, it's like the proactive piece than reacting, like, oh my gosh, you know, and what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So it's been, I think it's helped with a load of like, oh, this is heavy.
Yeah.
To not have that, right? Yeah.
It does. It feels so good to like get the list done though. Like when it's
Check
done,
those boxes.
it's done, right?
Walked up the stairs, check.
Yeah.
That's something that you can do too. It's a little mind game, is that you do things that you know you're going to get done, but you add it so you can check it off and you feel good about it. That's really been helpful for me too, because I have to do it anyway. It might be something I do weekly, but it helps me to be like, look at all the stuff I do, you know, or I got done. Because there's a lot of stuff we just do, and we're not really, I don't know, writing it down or saying, yes, look at what I do or whatever. Sometimes it's just helpful to complete. For me, it is. I know you like it too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because I mean, and you have a point with that, because some of the day-to-day routines, like I don't write it all out. Like I'll put the big stuff on there, but then it takes a longer time period to check off the big stuff. So I'm not meeting that reinforcement as soon as I would like to or possibly need to. So I mean, that's a great idea, is like writing out even the day-to-day things that you know you're gonna do anyways.
Yep.
It's kind of that like behavior momentum piece.
Yep.
I
That's
also
exactly
do
what
that.
it is. Yep.
I also do that. I'll do like the easy things that take less time.
Me too.
And then I'll get to the hard one at the end.
Well, I'll have my like list up there, you know,
Yeah.
and I'll go, oh, I got to do this, this, and this. I better add that. So you know, and it's just nice, because you realize how much you actually do. So I think it's great. Whatever helps motivate you.
Yeah.
You know, really. So yeah, I think that's good too. What else is on there?
I mean, we really just kind of related it all back to integrity and group integrity, which we touched on. But even with group integrity, like those are some of the things we found most, is how do we not just have boundaries for ourselves and meet deadlines for ourselves, but also in working with the whole group, how do we all meet our deadlines? How do we all come together at the same time every week and go through what has been accomplished? Because if I don't get something done, then that might mean that the other team members can't get their portion done. And we've come really far with that in a lot of these areas.
We really have, for sure. And again, that when you set those boundaries up, you know that you're going to be successful, because I'm going to affect you, you're going to affect me, and vice versa, because it's really the group. You know, when I think of the Pro-Social book, right? They talk a lot about that, which I'd love to get more into that at some point and you know, talk about that, because it really just shows a different perspective of how the group functions, you know, in a proactive way, you know. And so I don't know, do you want to say anything about that and how that relates to you? It's been a little while since I looked at that book.
Yeah, I mean, it's still about being proactive. It's about coming into a setting like that and knowing like the intention or the why behind, like if you think about I'm doing a project with group members, whatever that project is, it could be a research project, it could be like even when you were in like middle school, you would do projects, like science projects and things. So it all is very similar in the sense that you have guidelines as to like the why and almost like directions of like, this is what kind of needs to happen and how you get from point A to point B. Everyone has a task that they're to complete. And there's not one that is necessarily doing more than the other one. And it all has to come together as a whole to either have group integrity or to like restore group integrity. You all kind of have to do it together.
Do you remember what it said about like, you know, how when you're talking about middle school projects, how they'll a lot of times place an overachiever, for lack of better words, with somebody that doesn't do very much and how that backfires, right? And yeah, do you remember that piece of
I remember that piece a little bit. I might not explain it exactly right, but they do that a lot in school. Yeah. So they'll put like an achiever, like an overachiever, or like what we could classify as like a perfectionist with someone who maybe like goes with the flow or isn't that interested in the project or doesn't really care if the project gets done or not. And so putting those two people together, one would think that the other one would teach the other one. But what oftentimes happens is there's not that back and forth. So we're assuming that the achiever is going to, train the underachiever, but what responsibility does the underachiever have to the group? What purpose do they have to the group? Because if they don't have a purpose to the group or feel that sense of purpose, then why be a part of the group? And they might have their own integrity, like their individual integrity, but they might not agree with the group integrity and purpose. So you can be a part of a group and not agree with the group at all. And you could still actually have integrity because you could get in communication, you could be whole, sound, and complete as a human being and say, I don't agree with this group. And so I'm not going to be a part of it anymore.
I can't wait till we can get more into that because I think there's so much more into that, but a lot of things that we've been kind of taught, I guess, or conditioned to think isn't always what's actually happening. And a lot of things that they're talking about is the opposite of what we've been doing. Because I mean, I can think of my son in school, and he's one of the overachievers as far as like he wants to get an A+, like, and no matter what it is, he's just, and a lot of times he's like, Mom, I get put with somebody that does not care. Like they don't care. And he goes, it makes me so mad. And what happens with that, you know? And so it's just interesting because I remember those days. It's not any different because they're still doing it, you know? So it's just interesting to see what actually happens and what would be more successful or not, you know? So I would love to get into that more once we get back to that book a little bit. But anyway, I think those are boundaries too. That's all boundaries. And really, again, a proactive approach to that. So okay, so that's what did we just hit on? So the group integrity.
I mean, we touched on some like boundaries within like our ethical code as behavior analysts too. So one of them is the gift giving. So why can't we give gifts? Why can't we receive gifts? And so it does kind of cross that professional boundary. In doing so in that gift giving. And this is a huge topic that we're not going to go into in great depth.
Well, even the board keeps changing it.
They do. Yeah. Now you can accept things of $10 or less.
But is that at discount? Is that at Good Friday? Is that, I mean, it brings up so much. So I imagine that will bounce back a different way again because it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, really the purpose is to make sure that you maintain those like professional boundaries is really like when we talk about gift giving, when we talk about like multiple relationships, that dual relationship piece, it really all comes back to making sure that we like remain professional.
Well, and the why. So,
Mhm.
explaining the why of the gift giving and what that turns into. So an example I can remember, it didn't happen to me, but it happened to another team years ago where our parents had a favorite staff and bought a plane ticket somewhere for them and not the rest of the team. So what do you think happened?
Yeah.
Like the other part of the team were just as important as the one that they bought the ticket for. And in fact, from a clinician standpoint, the one that they bought a ticket for is because they became friends and they had an outside relationship, is what I was told. So that sets up lots of stuff.
Yeah.
And there was another one that I was just thinking, social media is another big one. How hard is that, to not be friends with somebody on social media or parents, because all they want, I mean, from a parent's perspective, I want to know my staff. I want to know who's working with my kid. I want to tell you I appreciate you. I want to show you that I appreciate you, but that also, again, turns into dual relationship. And I've seen it happen time and time again where they love somebody, and it was more in home, but there was so much, they just loved their team. And then one day somebody made a comment about a movie they saw, and all of a sudden they were like, I don't want this person working with my kid, because they didn't like the movie that they saw, and they thought they obviously judged the person. So it's, again, these boundaries are so hard because you're humans, and we have emotions and we have things that we like and don't like and things like that as a person. But that's where these boundaries come from.
Yeah, and just knowing everything that is in social media and how things can be taken the wrong way, all the things that you can possibly see about an individual, it just important to keep that separated, because what if I posted that I went to the movie theater and saw a movie that you don't necessarily agree with, or now you think that
politics.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Politics is a huge one. And you're going to put your own interpretation of what you think, who you think I am now.
Especially now with the way the world is.
Yeah,
for sure.
And it's just really hard to separate all of that unless you have very clear boundaries. So it sounds horrible to say, like, you can't have any communication with any of your families outside of the organization and outside of like just the clinical practice that goes back and forth. And that can sound very, like, I guess, robotic, like unhuman. But we've seen so many instances of that going badly when boundaries were crossed or there wasn't that clear kind of guideline with that.
Well, and I think just like we do in ABA is, what can you do? So for the gift giving, for example, we're like, this is kind of the, what we can't do, but here's what you can do. This is how you can show that, the staff are appreciated or what have you, because this benefits everybody. And it's more, buying something, a sensory item for the clinic, and you can donate it, and that helps everybody, and everybody feels appreciated, type of thing. So we try to do more of that, and
having like, so that for gift giving, I mean, we have our private like forums that we're posting like events or things that we're doing as an organization. I mean, so there's things like that too, where there's like some social media presence, but it's not like crossing that boundary. And I mean, we're all human, so you're always going to run into a situation where your boundaries are tested, or they're tested and your boundaries break or fall apart. And it's more about like, well, how do you rebuild those, and how do you move forward to maintain them and have clear ones? Because we understand that, I mean, mistakes happen.
Well, for sure. But if we're talking about boundaries up front and doing that proactive approach, they're less likely to happen. And then when they do happen, maybe it's something we didn't think of, because everything keeps evolving, we didn't have, I mean, I'm aging myself, but if you didn't have, if the cell phone wasn't a commonplace back 20 years ago, that wasn't an issue, but now it is. Watches, they didn't,
Yeah.
you can have the phone on your watch. That wasn't an issue how many years ago? It just keeps evolving. So new stuff keeps happening. And that's what I love about the field though, because it's constantly, you got to keep up on it. You got to know what's going on, and what we can do in home versus clinic. That's very different. There's many things that come up in that. So yeah, we've really been challenged, but again, being as proactive as you can and and then also just keeping the information moving, because you get new staff in, so you've got to constantly review it. So what can you do with that? How can you show boundaries that way? Modeling is a big one. Modeling your own boundaries to show them, because then they're more apt to do it. But if you're breaking your boundaries, of course, your staff under, the techs and other seniors or supervisors or whatever are gonna do that same thing. So that's really important too.
Yeah.
So don't practice what you preach, really. I mean, we're really good at that. Don't do that. You need, and then we're off doing it, because we got to get this stuff done. So really trying to practice what you preach as much as you can, so you can model that.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Is that everything?
I think so.
How long did we go?
30
Oh,
minutes.
that's a record. Well, thank you. Have a
Thank you,
nice day. Bye. That's a record.
That is a record.